Hello, we are live. Welcome to another chat. We're talking about family relationships. Sorry, I'm so out of breath still. I just ran up my stairs because someone rang the doorbell and I just locked it. No. So we're talking about family relationships, the fun, messy, complicated subject. And I warned these guys in advance that I was going to drop a question on them. So my first question is, what's your favorite book for an example for interesting, dynamic, or complicated family relationships? And we'll start with Megan, if that's okay. You're on my right.
Yes, that's perfect. I have to pop out and check on my bake
Perfect.
in 1 minute. So I was thinking about this, and I think I'm going to go with The Dead in the Dark by Courtney Gould. I just really thought the parent-child dynamic was really interesting. They acted like they were the main characters, trying to solve this mystery while the actual main character, their daughter, was trying to figure out what was going on. I just thought they were really well fleshed out, and I really enjoyed it.
Nice. Kelly?
I wanted to go with Strange the Dreamer. In all of the review scanning, I've only managed to find a couple of character names to remind me of this one, but Sarai's family of their little pseudo godlings. I forget all of what everyone was called here, but I don't think any of them were they're sort of siblings. Some of them might be. They're all children of half human, half gods, and a few of them are living up in this sky city after all of the gods have been slaughtered. So they have the sibling relationship, and then they haven't been aging, right? That's a thing.
No.
Yeah,
you're right.
Well, some of them have, some of them haven't.
Okay, because the one I thought was really interesting of the 6-year-old Minya, who's the sister, and who seems completely vile and awful, but you eventually learn some of the things she's had to do to protect her family, and so there's just been some it's more of a found family than necessarily a blood family. Almost, it's a strange dynamic, but it was all really interesting.
I love Strange the Dreamer. I'm so happy that Kelly, that you like Strange the Dreamer, because for so long you're oh, I'll read it eventually, and I'm
I don't know why I put it off forever.
It's pretty thick. I'm looking at it on my shelf right now. It's a good thick book. You have to sit down and get
For
into
me, it was more of I know I love her book so much. I really wanted to read it when I could appreciate it and read it in a fairly short amount of time rather than here and there. I wanted to immerse myself in it, but I still should have it sooner than
it took me a while to get into it, but I really liked it as well. And I think that found family is something we should discuss as well, because it we can come with similar dynamics as well.
And just to repeat that, for someone in the comments, that was Strange the Dreamer
by Lanny Taylor. Yeah, such a good book. Is the sequel out? Yeah. Okay.
News of Nightmares.
I gotta go out and get that.
it's only a duology, and I really wanted it to be a trilogy.
Is it really big as well though? Because I mean,
it's a big book.
They're medium. They're not Priory big.
Okay. Yeah.
From now on,
not
Priory
a lot of
is
things
just Priory is the thing that you
Yeah.
compare it to now.
Exactly.
It's half of a Priory.
That's a measurement system
Yeah.
now. It's just priories. And so I have Emma right under me here. What about you?
I think I'm gonna go with Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. I think it has a really a good complicated family dynamic where it is very close knit, but there is tension, and a lot of the book deals with family acceptance. So I thought it handled it really well without it being everybody hates each other or perfect little family. It was a very realistic family, which I liked. But also ghosts and magic.
Also, Ghost is always a good addition. What about you, Kyra?
I'm going to go with Darius the Great is Not Okay by Deep, which has family relationships all over the place. So he's got his parents that he has kind of interesting relationships, especially his father, who he used to be really close to, and now they kind of have communication issues and are really struggling to connect. He has a younger sister who he gets along well with, but she's a really well drawn out character as well. And then basically the premise of this book is that he is going to meet family that he's never met before. He's meeting grandparents. His grandpa is dying, and that's why his family is making this trip to go see his grandparents for the first time. so there's some language barrier issues. So there's just lots of really interesting dynamics there as well, where he's trying to kind of balance his own identity with meeting these people who they're family, but he doesn't know them. And are they going to accept him? Are they going to like him? And all the characters just all around are really, really well done.
I love that book so much.
So
good.
Rachel, have you gone yet?
I have not gone yet. No,
you.
I will wrap up. I was going to say the family of the Blackthorn children from Cassandra Clare's The Last Hours. Or sorry, not the well, I guess they're in there too. But I mean, the Dark Artifices, the Lady Midnight series. I love their dynamic, mostly because there's so many of them. I think there's 6, like 5 or 6, and I think this their family dynamic and of all ages as well is really good because it's kind of like Julian is like kind of their father figure. But he's also a kid himself, so he has a lot of pressure there. But it's all this thing of like what you would do for your family, how far are you willing to go to protect your family, like what does that mean? And then like expectations of people within the family dynamic of like how old you are you going to be taking care of your siblings, what gender are you, how does that affect stuff? And I love their dynamic so much. I think like they're so realistic and they squabble and they love each other. And as someone who doesn't have any siblings, I'm just like, I love this. I don't know if it's realistic, but I love it.
It's so funny. Like the squabbling with my sister and I was a big thing, and the loving comes like when you're a little more mature, at least in my experience. I love what you said about like having it as a theme of like how far will you go to protect your family, whether that's a found family or family. That is one of my absolute favorite themes. So one of my favorite ones is actually Devouring Grey for family dynamics. Yeah, because I'm a huge fan of like weird family secrets, and the Devouring Grey is like obviously chock full of that. And not just one family. There's like, what is there, 4 families total in the book, I think. And they kind of run this town, and they all have big family secrets, and all of their dynamics are like pretty messed up. And I'm a fan of complicated, messed up family dynamics with lots of tension and family secrets. So that one was a really good one for me, just because I'm a fan of like the tension and that was full of it. So
what was that last sentence you said? You cut out for most of it.
Is it just me cutting out, or is other people cutting out too?
You just cut out once.
Just
okay.
Once.
Yeah, it was minor.
Because I was hearing other people cut out too. I just said I'm obviously like I never shut up about microtension, and Devouring Grey was just like full of that because of the the sibling relationship, and that was tense because he was always jealous of his sister being their mother's favorite. And then the other main character, I can't remember any of their names right now. But the other main character was like, my mom is like, has drifted off somewhere essentially after the death of her sister, and like is obviously distant and hiding things as well. So I just like really like the something is missing from this narrative type of family story. So, So one of the things I was going to ask is, what is your favorite type of family dynamic to write? Whether you want to talk about the relationship, like, oh, I like siblings, or, oh, I like father-daughter, or you want to talk about, oh, I like complicated family secrets like me, or what have you. So jump in anytime. If anyone has a favorite.
I was thinking about this, and I don't feel like I write a ton of family dynamic. Like I tend to do more found family than actual family. But when I do actual family, like I do siblings sometimes. I enjoy doing sibling relationships. But I find I don't really focus much on like parent-child relationships. Like I might touch on them a little bit, but I don't know. Maybe I don't have enough like trauma relationships.
Well, go out and get more.
I don't feel the need to write about it. I don't know. Well, like the joke of like, oh, we're all the Disney moms, or like, oh, like all these YA characters with the being orphans and stuff. Is like, yeah, because you can't have your 15-year-old going off on fun adventures when their mom's like, hey, be home before 9, like take out the garbage. So
Exactly.
But if you want to, like actually lean into that, that would be hilarious. Because they're like, Mom, I have to go save the world. And she's like, that's nice, dear. You need to take out the garbage. Like,
chores first.
yeah, chores first.
Since we all managed not to talk about the Raven cycle too much, I do feel like there was a little bit of that in there of like Blue's mom knew there was some stuff going on and just kind of went with it and was as supportive as you can reasonably be.
Yeah. Well, like, I think that's another reason why I think it was actually you, Kelly, who at the very beginning, or maybe it was Aaron, at the beginning of this when we were all like planning out what we were going to talk about in today's chat.
So we don't
was like,
all
all right.
say.
So all say the Raven boys, like someone pick something else.
Nobody says the Raven boys.
Such a good dynamic.
It is.
You have parents who are there and they're like there to support and help out and like the kids go to them being like, hey, this thing is way too big for us. Like we need to bring in the big guns. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, and it was kind of the reason I said like, oh, we might all choose that is because that is such a family dynamic to me, is like this big messy family where they all live in this house together, and there's not even necessarily tension. They're not like at each other's throats or anything. But you do see everyone as a completely unique character. So it'd be interesting to talk about, how Maggie Stiefvater actually accomplishes that with a cast that big, But something I wanted to touch on is the actual, like, how it was a trope in YA for like a really long time to have dead parents, like just kill off the parents. And like, if we think that's improving or not, like, are we still seeing?
Like my immediate thing just to say is yes, but that's also because I started reading more books that typically have families in them. Like I do not, I've said this on multiple times, like I read up to or lesser than a contemporary a year. So like I don't really read contemporary everyday, books. And of course there's more family dynamics in those. So me reading more of those, I'm like, oh yeah, there's like so many more now. But I think like there's a couple in like fantasy that I've noticed. There's more mother figures, there's more like family dynamics, especially when it comes to like princesses. Like there's a lot more stuff to do with like the king and queen and like her brother, or like their family dynamic, or I felt like there's more like royalty stuff more recently. I don't know.
Which makes sense, because if you have like the family dynamic is like doubled and tripled in a royal family, because it's like it's not just family tension, it's like court politics and stuff too. We have some comments. And Griswold says, I like the relationship between Zoe and her dad and Sawkill Girls. I love Sawkill Girls. And yes. Yeah. She said, I'd like to see more father-daughter relationships where the mother is absent. I really like seeing single parent narratives and where they're really full fleshed out and like involved in the story, like Fangirl. The dad is like definitely a part of the narrative,
Or, like Marine Goose, what's her second one? The Way You Make Me Feel. Really great job with like the father-daughter relationship in that one too.
Mm-hmm.
We love supportive dads.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Megan went on a whole thing about that. I feel like
don't make them too supportive, or I will have a crush on them. It does not.
Megan, he's so.
I'll be like, why aren't they on the page more? Like the bar is on the ground. The dad like makes eye contact for 2 seconds, and I'm like, he's such a good dad.
it's like Twilight's like.
The last book Megan Beta read for me like has twice as much dad now because of that.
Stand by it.
And say it's like the like Twilight's like renaissance that's going on right now is mostly just like people our age like suddenly realizing that like Charlie was hot.
Or that even like he was kind of a good dad because he was like actually like he like bought her a car and like wanted her to be happy and stuff, and everyone's like, oh my gosh,
she just ran off in Italy after her boyfriend.
Yeah, right.
Pieced out of there. Yeah.
That's like I think my favorite family dynamic personally is just like one that kind of mimics my own experience, which is family that is allowed to disagree and sometimes fight, but still if something big is happening, they will just like absolutely just kill for each other, like go to war or whatever for each other. I just think that's really interesting. And to me, it's more fun than estranged. We're just absolutely not talking, any of us. There's no family present.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, when I'm writing family, because I'm such a found family type of writer, a lot of the time, like I'm looking back, I'm like, well, Bryony was just stuck in an attic and it was just her aunt and uncle sort of, like raising her. So they're the bad guys. And then I'm like, the dad in Witch's Afternoon is also a bad guy. And none of the parents in my current work in progress are good either. So
I think it's also a thing of you have to realize that your parents are people too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's also why, going back to Raven Boy, is like why that family works so well is because yes, they're parents and they're authority figures, but they're also characters.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people don't want to write, the parents, because you typically think of parents being like not fun or like holding the main character back because you should be responsible, and no one wants to write that. They want to write like fun and spunky adventures. But I think you can also have so much more tension and like good character connections if you do have a character like that, like Kyrie mentioned, like Darius the Great, or like having that connection that even if it's awkward, like it's still something to pull on and work with. And then like Aaron says, microtension, like that's something that you can pull in, because everyone's family has some kind of drama, whether or not it's we murdered somebody a whole long time ago and no one talks about it, or if it's like, oh, there's an estranged aunt, or if it's like, you better get straight A's or I'm kicking you out of my house. Like there's always some kind of thing that you can pull on.
Yeah, and I do think you were mentioning, Aaron, just the fact that like a lot of times the parent figures are the bad guys, or in Bryony you were like, she's in an attic, but like a huge theme in Bryony is kind of figuring out like, what is the deal with her parents? How did she end up here? And so even when they're not on the page, I think assuming your character has parents or knows anything about the fact that they have parents, I do think to some degree your family should play some sort of role, even if they aren't on the page. Like that's a really fun thing to play with. Definitely. I think Amelia said complicated dynamics and broken families, divorce, remarriages, family deaths. Those are my favorite to write. And like, yeah, the absence of a family member is such an interesting dynamic to play with if you look at it and don't just ignore it.
Well, it's like, I mean, I hate to go back to the same well all the time, but with Harry Potter, that was like such a huge thing that we saw over and over and over that like developed who he was as a character, and his motivation was like all about his father in particular, his parents in general, but particularly his father. Like he even thought he saw him, but it was him, and all of this stuff, right? We get a lot of symbolism and stuff, but yeah,
I think
they never show up.
Yeah, I think about too in like Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko, the relationship with the mother is just such a huge driving factor for that character, and it's so interesting and like so well done. Still my favorite book of the year so far.
It was such a good book.
Yeah, there's something really interesting to be said about family dynamics or past history as character motivation. Because a lot of the time, obviously, family is going to be a huge part of your character's backstory, and so where they're coming from, who they were raised with and by, is a good place to go to if you're looking for some what's my character's motivation, what kind of choices are they going to be making in this story.
But I think even if you have like a perfectly healthy dynamic, like you can have some interesting character traits come for that. So like for me personally, I have a really, really great relationship with my parents. They're both great, I think. And so and overall feel like my relationship with them is very, very healthy. But they're both incredibly mild-mannered, and I'm incredibly mild-mannered. So kind of as a result of that, like we're all very conflict avoidant. And that's not like the result of some unhealthy thing that's happened to us, but it does sometimes like cause issues because we're all so conflict avoidant.
Like one of my favorite things to read is having two very different families meet, or have like one character from one family join the other. Like those are some of my favorites. Like I'm trying to think like what's that one on my shelf that I can't read? My Life Next Door by Becky Rebecca. Nope. Somebody. Huntley Fitzpatrick. Or she has like she's just like what I think like a single mother who's like very absent, and then the family next door is loud and boisterous, and she gets like pulled into it. Like that's so fun.
That's cute.
Just to like have her be like kind of overwhelmed but like really happy in this completely other dynamic. Or in I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver, which was one of our book clubs, having our what's his name, Ben? Yes, Ben's their name. Go over with their love interest, whose name I also don't remember, but have their love interest has like this really sweet, supportive family, and Ben hasn't felt like that with their own family. So like that kind of thing. I just love that thing. It's so heartwarming.
That makes me think of too. I recently just read how it all blew up, or how it blew up, by Arvin Ahmadi, and it was really good and played with that dynamic too of like having your like biological family and then also having a found family that's coming up alongside of it. And it was really, I tore through that book. It was really good.
This like discussion reminds me of the movie Always Be My Maybe, Always Be Your Maybe. Or the exact
Park.
I and Ali Wong. I love that movie, and I think it does a really good job of kind of like playing with that, like very different families where like she has parents who were really absent because they were running their own business or something, and they were really busy with their business, and so she was kind of like a latchkey kid, and so she was really good friends with Randall Park's family, and like his parents kind of took her in, and that like dynamic of like they felt like her family, but then when like the mom dies, like what does it mean when it isn't actually your parent? It's just someone who felt like a parent, and also like the complicated feeling she has about her own parents, and like even though they're like trying more now that they're like retired, as when she's an adult, like how she's still like dealing with those like bitter feelings of how they kind of left her on her own all the time. It's really interesting, like the two different dynamics and how it plays with those.
What are those novels with the mom who is like half antagonist? The Angel Fall ones, I think.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh
she was hands down my favorite character in that book because she was so unpredictable.
Oh my god, I forgot about that. Oh god, they're so weird. Oh, they're so weird. Yes, she's bonkers. Like what a And like her little sister gets abducted, but then by angels, demons, sort of. It's a weird thing.
Angels, I think.
Yeah, who are not good guys. Oh man, yeah. Oh, the mom is so weird.
It's so good though because it just adds like such an extra element of suspense because you're like, okay, maybe we're safe because the sky is clear, but what the heck is my mom gonna do next? Like,
well,
it could be. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, like, for context, I'm sure we're both yelling. I don't know if people know what we're talking about. Angel Fall by Susan E. Just double E. Fantastic series.
We did that for a book club.
We did. I think
a long time ago.
Yeah, a million years ago.
But the mother in that, I believe. Well, she has multiple mental illnesses. I believe one of them is schizophrenia.
I think so.
And I haven't reread that series for a long time, so I don't know how like actually accurate it is. But probably not very accurate. But the mother is, I will say, psychotic, and she's on medication sometimes she's not. And especially then the series kind of takes place like just after apocalyptic things start happening. So medication is not there. And so the mother kind of comes back and forth, like being lucid, not being lucid, seeing things that aren't there. And she's a wild card because you truly do not know like what she's going to be doing and like what mood she's going to be in. And like, oh, it's amazing. And that tension is so good.
She was my favorite. I don't think I've quite read a character like her before.
I have to reread that series.
Yeah, me too.
I never finished it. I read the first two back to back, and then like I liked the second one.
I feel like for me it went downhill a little bit when it was all just like I fell in love with an angel, and I was like, okay, well, I've seen this before, but the family dynamics when they were first there and like the thing between her and the horror aspect of it obviously was all very interesting to me. So I guess if any of us have actual like tips to writing like a tight-knit family or tension within a family and portraying that realistically?
I think one of the things to keep in mind with family is that unless they are a family who haven't seen each other ever, like they have just met for the first time, they're going to have a really long history. And so small things are going to seem bigger to the family member interpreting that thing, even if they spent a lot of time apart. Like your character might think, oh, my sibling has done this thing, they must be mad. And for that sibling, it might not mean that anymore. A lot of time has passed. And so just thinking about the little things, you know, my sister smiles when she lies. I'm going to know that always. Like,
interesting. I love stuff like that.
I don't know if she knows that, but she probably doesn't watch this. So
I'm like taking character notes over here.
Yeah. Like there's just going to be little things like that that your character will know about their siblings or their parents.
It's interesting. I know that a lot of people, when they create a character, they'll take little bits and pieces of people they know. So that way, obviously, you know, they're not necessarily recognizable as this is clearly your sister or your best friend or your mother, but they've taken that little slice of a person and, you know, inserted it into a different character. And I love a detail like that, like Megan, whose sister smiles when she lies, or like my sister, who has like a very cutting sense of humor. And you're like, is this funny, or am I being completely burned right now? Right? Like just little things like that are things that I would kind of like collect like a magpie, like, ooh, shiny, and put them in a completely fictional character. And that I feel like forms like a more well-rounded, realistic family member, you know.
Yeah, and I think something interesting to play with too, particularly in like a speculative fiction setting, is what would your character's family member have to do to get your character to stop vibing with them? Like, is it just the tiniest thing will throw your character off the handle, or do they have to like murder someone in front of your character for your character to turn against them? Or does not even that apply?
Yeah. Would your character help them hide the body?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what are their limits with their sibling or parent or grandparent?
That is actually another really interesting question, even like applied to people in my real life. Like, thinking back on, you know, I'm always telling this one friend, like, you're too nice, because she would never cut off any of her family, even though her family is like, you know, some of them are super sketchy. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, he's coming back in your life because you just got, you know, like a sum of money. That's why he's here. And you need to kick him to the curb. And she'd be like, but no, he's family or whatever. And I'm like, okay. Like, you're not Slytherin enough is like, you know, stuff I would always say, but like, that's a very interesting character trait for someone to have. It's like, you can't do something awful enough for me to cut you out of my life. It's just not going to happen. Right. Versus someone who's like, well, you know, you looked at me wrong, so this is over.
Yeah, and that could even, if you're writing a character like that can cause tension later in the book, because maybe this character's too nice and they end up forgiving somebody that your character doesn't want them to forgive, or like, you know, extra tension with like someone coming back into their life when they said no, and then, oh my god, there's so much tension everywhere.
Yeah, well, or even, you know, forgiving that person and then they come and do what they always do and mess everything up, right? Like,
exactly.
That happens in real life all the time. Something I thought would be interesting to talk about is like, obviously we have a lot of room for family dynamics in like contemporary, but you know, we were talking about stuff like Angel Fall and her mom gets like a very brief amount of page time and then we're thrown into the adventure. So I'm wondering if you guys think there's a better way of weaving family into speculative fiction, or they're always just going to take a back seat kind of.
I think several of the books we said we liked were speculative fiction. So obviously,
Raven Boys comes to mind.
And Cemetery Boys, Strange the Dreamer, like those are all speculative fiction.
It's interesting because like there are books where they're kind of, the family's like in the background, present all the time, but in the background. And then there are books where the family is a part of the fantasy narrative. Obviously, like Strange the Dreamer, the gods are gods and they are the story. And Raven Boy's, you know, like Blue's mom is involved in the adventure directly. Stuff like that is interesting. Whereas you get like Cassandra Clare's books where Clary's mom is like, I think like whisked off in the first few chapters and she's needs to be rescued. So it's interesting.
I think speculative a lot of times does a really good job with sibling relationships. Like they can sometimes add some. So I'm thinking off the top of my head of like The Cruel Prince, where the sisters are like really prominent, or Caraval, where it's like all centered on finding her sister. So
yeah, I was thinking about There Will Come a Darkness, where like one of the characters, a lot of her motivation is based around saving her sister.
I feel like that's really common in fantasy.
Hunger Games.
Yeah,
Yeah. I would be really interested. Oh, go ahead.
Just like again, it's that like parents aren't fun. So it's like more, you know, it's more, I guess, relatable for a younger audience to talk about sibling dynamics and not parental dynamics.
Yeah, for sure.
We've talked a lot about like sibling, parent, grandparent. I would love if anyone has any book recs for adult books from the POV of someone who like is a parent, but it's not. I would prefer not about like saving the child, but just like an interesting like we're doing an adventure together. We're solving a murder together. If anyone has any recs for that, let me know. I'm sure they must exist, but I've never seen them.
That would be really interesting because I definitely have not seen one where it's always about rescuing the child or that type of thing. Where the main
that's like an obvious motivation for a parent. Like save the child, but like I don't know
exactly.
None of the children need saving from their parents in YA. Why do they suddenly need saving in adult?
I want like I'm helping my child hide this body because they murdered someone.
Yes.
There you go.
Wow. I would love to see like a very typical YA, teenage girl has to save the kingdom or the dystopian society or whatever, but from the point of view of her mother or father that's like in the revolution as well. Like what kind of feelings would you have if your daughter is like the figurehead of a revolution and you're like, but like I'm still making peanut butter sandwiches with the crust cut off. She can't in the world. Like
I think it'd be like really interesting to have like the parent who's like part of the leadership of the rebellion and their child like thinks they know what the best thing to do is and keeps going off to try and like fix things. It's like, no, like you don't know.
But like the different lens you would see that through if you were like Katniss's mom, you'd be like, why do you want my child to be the head of your revolution? Like there's something seriously
for you,
something sketchy going on here, right? Like it would be very interesting. Different story for sure.
Yeah. Melissa mentioned Gilmore Girls has an interesting parent-child dynamic. I'm actually rewatching Gilmore Girls right now, which is probably what made me think of it. Because obviously Lorelai is immature because she's 32 years old and has a 16-year-old. But also like lots of adults of all ages are immature. And like, I don't know, being a young parent doesn't necessarily mean that you know less than an older parent. Like lots of older parents also don't know what they're doing and just I don't know. I would love to see more of it. Give me your recs in the comments or in the discussion section if you know them.
I feel like I would relate a lot more. Like last time I watched Gilmore Girls, I did not have a child, but now that I do, I feel like if I watched it, I would be like, oh yeah, I'm Lorelai, cool. I'm not mature.
I feel like as an adult, I'm more annoyed by Lorelai actually.
Oh,
like
really?
When I was like a teenager, I was like, oh, she's such a cool mom. And now as an adult, I'm like, you're so irresponsible.
This is really off topic, but I am so proud right now. I've been jumping out because I mistimed my bake. That was my fault. But look, it looks like a little turtle. I have to finish decorating it, but I made these little turtle buns.
Oh my gosh, Megan, that's so cute.
I'm so
Congratulations.
excited.
That's great.
His little feeties didn't burn.
No, they didn't. I'm so happy. I got to draw little faces and put some cute little stars on them. And
oh my gosh, fantastic.
Turtle buns.
Megan's been upping her baking game lately.
Yeah.
Mine always looks like that, like nailed it. On Pinterest.
I made some cookies last night and they were delicious, but they were really ugly.
My baking tastes good, but it just looks like trash.
That's what I'm trying to work on this year. Is like I know how to make it taste good, but I don't know how to make it cute. And I've been working through the Baking with Kim Joy book. She was one of the Great British Bake Off contestants, and she had just hands down the cutest bakes out of every year.
Oh,
so
is it Crazy
Like
Foxy
Crazy
said,
Foxy
that turtle looks like it's a Kim Joy.
it is. It's from her cookbook.
I thought that the Crazy Foxy was just like naming your turtle. Like, looks
No.
like Kim Joy. Okay. Sure.
it's
This
totally
one looks
from
like
Kim Joy's
Richard.
cookbook.
This one,
Just name all your turtle buns.
yeah, exactly. This one's Tahara. This one's Victoria.
Yes.
This one's Richard. This one is Clarence.
They're all after authors.
yeah.
So we talked a little bit about like tips or things that you do to write a relationship. I'm trying to think what I do. Like I said, it's almost always a tense relationship.
I think with family, it's the familiarity that sets it apart from, say, just like a really close friendship or even a romantic relationship. And I suppose it would change a little bit based on like if you haven't seen this family member for years and years. But even then, it could even be like they look like me. They have the same nose shape. Like it's unsettling to see my face on someone else. Or if it's like any kind of family dynamic, I don't know, contemporary or something. If they say one thing and their parents like, or like, you've said that since you were young, like that kind of thing. It's like that like the small detail familiarity with it. Whereas even if you're super close with a friend, your family is going to know what you do when maybe you can't sleep at night, or they're going to know what foods you didn't like growing up, or like those kind of things. So I think that's like, you got to take that into consideration. Even if you write the dynamic of like the parent and the child don't get along, or if you write that the sisters are really close, like everyone in the family is going to have a different kind of like familiar connection with that character.
I also think in terms of like that shared past is really interesting, and also that really implied shared future of like no matter how bad things get, it's a lot harder to shake these people, especially if you still like other people in your family who are connected to them, and like odds are, obviously you don't have to, but odds are you and your family are still kind of together in the future, and so no matter what things look like now, it's just that much messier because you can't. It's harder to just get away.
There's an implied obligation, even though like as far as healthy psychology goes, we understand like you aren't obligated to anyone who mistreats you, but there is this like, oh, but they're my family. Oh, but we grew up together,
Yeah, I when Rachel said about the familiarity thing, it strongly reminded me of that saying like and that's
we missed the saying. Sorry, you cut out.
Oh, darn it. The saying is familiarity breeds contempt. And I think I would correct it more though to familiarity doesn't necessarily breed contempt, but it breeds like a I'm going to stick my nose into your business. So like whatever your character is doing, their siblings or their family is going to try to be involved in some way, most likely. Well, particularly if it's a child-parent relationship, if you're the 17-year-old main character is, out there saving the world or falling in love, whatever they're doing, realistically, if you have normal parents, so to speak, they're going to be involved in some way. They're going to be trying to like tell them what decisions to make or what not to do. And so that can be an interesting source of tension for sure.
Yeah. Joe Catherine said, I think the familiarity is what makes the family secret so terrifying, which is definitely true.
Yes.
I think also, I know someone mentioned earlier as a tip to like think about how like your family tends to like know things about you that other people might not know. But also to think about the things that a family member might think they know about a person. Because I think it's really interesting when someone isn't what their family expects them to be. Like maybe there has been an expectation of like the kind of child they are. Like they're always the good child. And like what happens when they like go against something that they always like went along with, So when they kind of like defy that expectation from their family and they aren't who they're like supposed to be. I think that's really interesting.
Definitely.
That makes me think of what's the Alyssa Cole novel where she goes to do like a blacksmithing apprenticeship.
Oh, the Duke one. What's it
Yeah,
called?
it's in the Duke series.
The title has Duke by default.
Duke by default, yeah.
I
That one I
love
thought
that.
had really
That's my favorite
interesting
one.
family dynamics because she was like, I'm gonna, everyone thinks I'm flaky. Everyone thinks that I mess things up. My sister thinks it. My parents think it. They think that me taking this apprenticeship is me being flaky, but it's actually me trying to take my future more seriously. And then it's also a roadblock to her falling in love because she's like, well, it's like a super flaky mess up your life thing to do to fall in love with your boss. So, and like, she's always thinking of it in like my family will think this when they find out.
Oh yeah, one of the things we talked about with Hill House was the family dynamics there, and the fact that their family was so divided over them all seeing the same thing and interpreting it so differently, and yet they all had this resentment against their father, or at least most of them did, regardless of how they interpreted that. If you guys have not watched Hill House, all of the word nerds really love it. And it's a really good example of family, complicated family.
It does a great job with that kind of like the expected roles of each of them, like Shirley and the oldest Steve are like supposed to be like the like parents of the others and they take care of them. And then like Nell and Luke are the screw ups, the youngest who everyone has to like watch out for them because they're so messed up, and then like Theo's just like the middle child.
I was thinking, actually, jumping back to parent-child, I wanted to bring up the house on the Cerulean Sea, which is like it's an orphanage. There's all these children there who are being raised, and the orphanage leader, the owner of the orphanage, is like falling in love with this caseworker, and it's it's a happy ending, so you can guess what's going to happen. But that was a really good like parent-child type.
Yeah, because like it's an orphanage, but it's very much implied that these children are here forever.
Yeah, they are there forever. Yes,
I have to read that book. I have to.
So good.
You should.
I know. I keep seeing it on the internet, and I just haven't gotten a chance to pick it up yet.
So many books.
Well, I was gonna say, is that a good? It's like a segue into like found family.
Well, I just want to touch on actually before we segue into that. And Griswold asked an interesting question. Can we brainstorm different types of tension between different family members? I feel like I rely on rivalry or best of friends dynamics for everything. That's a really good question, kind of like what different types of tension we would see between different family relationships.
I think one really common one with like siblings is this feeling like, in a lot of families you have like, well, this one's the responsible one and this one's the fun one, so like, and so I think there's a tendency to have, or there's at least potential to have some really good conflict if it's like you're the responsible one and you're tired of being the responsible one, or conversely, like if you're the fun one and you have like this maybe older sibling who's constantly trying to get you to like be more responsible, even though like you don't feel like you need to be more responsible.
There's also, I think, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just think that I think somebody already mentioned expectations, like that could for anybody, which is, oh, you're the responsible one, we expect you to do this, or the expectation of between the parent and the child or the siblings or what have you. Like expectations are what keep a family together and cause a lot of tension.
Family secrets always cause a lot of tension.
Yeah, definitely.
Or like the estranged family member, like somebody who isn't around much,
That segues actually into what I was going to say, which is there's some really tense dynamics when you get into the area of like the golden child or the favorite sibling. And there's like, actually, if you look up like psychology terms, there's a whole study into this of like the golden child. And then sometimes there's just the golden child and the normal child. And sometimes there's a golden child and the scapegoat child. And you can have really complex and sometimes really nasty dynamics in a family with that type of relationship. And it's going to really depend on like what the parents are like in particular. How are they raising these children? If you go to like Raised by Narcissist on Reddit, you will find like the most complex, scary, actually, family dynamics that these poor people are raised in. And obviously that's an extreme example, but like if you're raised by a narcissist versus you're raised by a pair of hippies that met each other at Woodstock, you're going to have two different, very different relationships with your family, you know?
Yeah. Like how involved the parent is, or involved a family member is, parents, whatever, involved in your life, whether that's like a helicopter mom or if they're like completely absent.
I think there's a lot of room to, even under just like the rivalry and the best friend umbrella, to add a lot of nuance to that. Like, you know, you could have a rivalry where one sibling thinks the rivalry is fun because we're pushing each other to be better, and one is absolutely not having a good time. Or in the best friends arena, you know, you can have tension there because when you're really close to your siblings, sometimes it's easy to feel like, oh, they are, you know, me 2.0. I know exactly what they're going to do. And it's easy to forget that they aren't you 2.0 and they might do something that you aren't expecting. And you have to like come to terms with it because you're friends. You don't want to damage the relationship, but you don't understand.
One really good example of that is it's called Just for Clicks by, I think Kara McDowell's her name. And so basically the premise of that one is the main character and her sister, their mom's like a popular mommy blogger, and as they've grown up, they kind of have like this huge social media following that her sister loves and she hates, but because they're kind of like treated as a package deal, it's like, well, if I leave this, then it's going to ruin it for my sister as well.
Wow.
Oh, Tweet Cute by Emma Lord has a similar thing. With
I was wondering when we would get
read those.
I was wondering when we would get a children of social media influencers type of books or real life biographies. Because that's gotta be a
oh man, I can't. I know. I mean, like this sounds so bad, but like I can't wait for the next 20 years when all of these like children of mommy vloggers or like the like family vloggers, once they like get lawyers and like write memoirs.
For real.
I came across someone on TikTok who like was the child of a mommy blogger, and she's now an adult. She's like a mom herself and has kids. I think. But they talk a lot about like the trauma and how like they don't talk to their mom anymore.
Wow.
Because their mom was very much a narcissist and was using it like to get like support in like how difficult it was for her to be a mom too, you know, so like she would use it to like talk bad about her kids and how like traumatic it was to like see people agreeing with their mom, you know, and being like, oh yeah, your kids are being so awful, you know. Well, like there's like I don't remember exactly like where it was, but it was a girl who it was on Reddit, so like, you know, maybe true, maybe not, but it was about a girl who's like 14, 15, and she and her younger sister were you know, the children of a mommy blogger, and for the most part, like her mom like posted some pictures and stuff online, and when she said like I don't want those online anymore, her mom kind of like tried to guilt trip her into it because like so many people follow the blog.
Is this the one with the shirt?
Yeah, and she got like shirts printed that say like I do not consent, like no photos, please, like I do not consent to photography, and she like wears them all the time, and I'm like, that is insane. Like very smart, but yeah, like that is insane to have to grow up like that, like in the spotlight.
Yeah, like have a film crew in my house at all times. Cool.
Yeah.
You would always have to be on, especially at 14 when you're like so concerned about how you look and how people perceive you. I cannot.
And you're going through puberty and it's just awkward and like it would suck.
Yeah.
Well, I think on that topic and more generally in terms of just different kinds of family tension, the idea of fairness comes up a lot. Of like, so is it fair for those parents? Are your divorced parents treated like fairly, and how those relationships? Do parents give equally to children? I just feel like fairness is something that comes up often in family dynamics. Isn't this something you can play with a lot?
I think you see like the TikToks all the time of like, you know, the oldest child is like this, the middle child's like this, the youngest child gets away with everything, you know, like that kind of.
It's accurate. That was very much how it was. Like I always complain I was not allowed to read Harry Potter, and now my family is like, big Harry Potter fans, like concluding my like ultra conservative dad and mom, like what is going on here?
And even like,
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, even as adults, you know, like I know in my own life I've seen a little bit of like, well, I was the oldest, and so my parents assumed I was the most responsible. So as an adult, they questioned me less. And then when like my sister tried to do the same thing, she got way more pushback because they didn't like when I did the things. Like,
that's interesting.
Aaron, just random question. Where are you in your family order? Are you middle?
I'm oldest. And then I have
I thought your sister
is older.
Yeah, me too.
oh, she would love that. That was one of our family dynamics, is that she might not love that anymore. One of our family dynamics was that she would rub that in my face constantly. Was like, so-and-so said I look like the older sibling.
oh, I hate that. I get that too.
Yeah, me too.
We have a lot of
And
me and my brothers are so far apart in age that no one ever got our order mixed up.
Well, we had a weird thing where like some people would be like, oh, you must be twins, and we would both be like, no, like, because neither of us thought we looked at all similar. But mostly we would get the she's older, isn't she? And then she would just like gloat for like a week. Yeah, at the time, I think at like 14, 15-year-old me was like bothered by it for some reason.
Now you're like my youthful parent.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember being bothered by it too as a kid because my sister does look older than me. Yeah. She's like, I'm the shortest in my family. So like, you know, I just have that going against me. Everyone's going to think I'm the youngest. But I remember as a teen being like, ugh, no one's going to understand. My sister's not older than me. She thinks she's so cool. She was older than me. But now it's like, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, I got lucky because I'm the same height as Megan, but my sister's not even 5 feet. So
she's extra.
Well, like there's another dynamic. Maybe one of your characters like pretends to be the other one because they look older or something, and they get in trouble. I don't know.
I'm really excited for Sisters of the Snake by Serena and Sasha Nanua. Where it's got like twins and mistaken identity, and it just sounds so good. I'm very excited.
Look it up on Goodreads right now.
Yes.
I'm intrigued.
Crown of Coram Pearl also has that and did it really well. And then I also just read, it's not really mistaken identity, but like David Yoon's Super Fake Love Song, where this girl comes over to his house, but he's like in his brother's room. There's like a cool musician and he plays D&D. And so this girl like is visiting their house and comes in his brother's room where he is, and it's like, oh, you like all this stuff, you're cool. And he's like, yes, I do like all this stuff. And forms a fake band with his friends to try and impress this girl. So.
Oh my god, that sounds amazing. First of all, how dare anyone slander D&D? It's very fun. It's not nerdy.
She didn't see the D&D room, and that was not commentary for me. That was his perspective. That was like, she likes my rock star brother persona. I'm gonna lean into that.
Yeah, of course.
We had some recommendations for other dynamics. Oriah mentioned the siblings with a very large age gap having a really different relationship, which Emma, you mentioned.
Brother. Yeah.
And Emma Ward mentioned siblings that just exist together and aren't necessarily friends or enemies as children. And now as teens and adults, they're getting to know each other.
Yeah. Well, like my mom and my aunt are 8 years apart. And so my mom kind of talks about that as well. Like my aunt's younger. So when my mom was moving out of the house, my aunt was just becoming a teenager. So like they never really had that much in common. And they like didn't communicate very well until they were in their, I think, 30s and 40s when they both had kids. And then they had something to kind of, as like a baseline to communicate with.
Something to talk about.
Yeah, just because they were so, and like at the different points of like my family, like my parents are immigrants. So like the different points of them, like being in Canada and, you know, that kind of thing. Just like the way that they both grew up was very different. So that's a whole other thing. And then like I was the first grandchild of the family and the first girl, and I don't have any siblings, and I have one cousin. So like, you know, all the hopes and dreams are put on me, as I have been told.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Size is another interesting one though, because like conversely, I have 40 some cousins, and it changes things. Like it's different, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Like
Um,
I didn't feel like I only knew one of my grandparents anyway, but like I didn't have a close relationship with her because like when people talk about like really close relationships with grandparents, like my grandma had like 30 grandchildren. Like
Yeah.
wow.
And
Damn.
mine has
Oh my
30
God.
some 23, 26, I think is where we're at on my dad's side, but she knows all of us like, quite
That's a
well.
lot.
She's full-time
Full-time
she's
grandma.
very full-time grandma and has been
Yeah, my
It
mom
sounds like
talked about
a
this
sitcom or something.
recently because like I have a similar situation. So me and my sister did not a ton of time with aunts and uncles and grandparents, but my sister's kids are going to be the only kids from either her or her husband's family. So they have 4 grandparents that are all about them. I've spent more time with my niece and nephew already, and the oldest is 2, than I ever did with any of my aunts and uncles. So it's a very different what that family connection is. And I'd be so curious to explore like Rachel's with her parents being the only child. And so all of those things interconnect in ways you'd never expect.
That is really interesting because it's the same with my son. He is an only child, and his grandparents are like 5 minutes away. He's with them now, actually, and he's going to grow up just incredibly close to his grandparents. The same way that my husband was. My husband was over his grandparents literally lived in his backyard. Their houses were built kitty corner to each other. And it was like a second set of parents. And that's bizarre to me because my parents or my grandparents, one set was gone and dead, and the other one was always in like hundreds of miles away, like completely different province. So yeah, it's a very different, having 2 sets of parents essentially is really strange to me, but that's what some people grow up having, really. Yeah.
I'm curious, do you guys, and if you do, how much do you mind your own family relationships or like relationships of families that you yourself have observed in your own writing?
Like how much do we want to put it in our writing, you mean? Like
how much do you pull on like your own experience when you're crafting family dynamics?
For me, it depends a lot on the book. So like I have one work in progress with the sibling relationship that is drawing very heavily on my family. But like I've also written things like I've written single parent relationships that like I have not experienced at all and wouldn't know anything about.
It's funny because when I wrote Witches, Bash, and Ruin, I started out thinking like, oh, I'm going to sort of smush both parents together and make Dana's dad into them, like parts of them. I don't ever take a whole person and put them in because I don't know if I can get sued for that. But I realized as I was writing the dad, though, that I'm like, oh, this is not my parents. Like he's way too extreme. And my parents were not this extreme. They were conservative Christian, but they weren't like cruel. I realized that the dad did not signify my parents. He signified almost like my own inner like demon, I guess, to be super dramatic. Like, because I was a very anxious child and all of the Christian stuff that penetrated my subconscious was like, hey, you're going to hell for all of these reasons. And, you know, he started out being dad and mom. And then it was like, oh no, this was just like my own inner messed up, my own business. So I don't think that I like, even if I try, I don't think that I technically ever end up really inserting any of my family dynamics in there. I have tried though.
Yeah, I was asking mostly because I remember back when I was writing like exclusively YA, and I was like a very baby writer. I would sometimes let my family read my work, and at the time there wasn't a mom alive on page.
Oh dear.
And I sent my mom this book I had written where the climax of the book is this character who you've just found out is a serial killer, like goes in and kills their mom. And she was like, what did I ever do?
It's so funny because like even though the dad is not my parents, there is a direct quote that my mom said to me at one point that the dad says to Dana. And I'm like, well, she's never going to read it anyways. It's about bisexual witches, so it's probably fine.
See, I am always super aware of it because I know that my family will read a book of mine when it comes out. And so I'm always like, what if they see this and think that it's them? You know, I have a book that I've been working on for ages that it has 3 siblings in it, just like there's 3 siblings in my family, and all 3 of the siblings are just different parts of my personality. Like I've just kind of extracted that, and but it's like there's 3 of them, same gender spread.
Wasn't it the last chat that said the first draft is just all the characters are me in a wig?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. It's that.
Yeah,
But I'm like so
I tried-
paranoid someone's gonna look at it and be like, "That's us."
I feel like someone will always say that anyways, even if you put nothing, like J.K. Rowling saying that everyone was trying to claim different characters. Like, oh, you wrote me in there. I'm Hagrid. And she's like, who are you?
Yeah, but I feel like Megan's siblings would have like a stronger claim here.
That's a fair point.
Well, then they can play those characters if it ever gets adapted to TV, you know?
Yeah.
And like you have built-in actors, you're good to go.
If they say like, "Is this me?" I'll probably just be like, "Yeah, all the worst traits are pulled from you."
You're the villain.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like I know like sometimes writers like stress about people like thinking that a character is them or whatever, but I remember being at some like book conference that Jason Reynolds was at, and he was just straight up like, yeah, I use people from real life, and like they're always just like really excited, like they're always like, oh, I'm in your book.
I think people would just be flattered unless they're like depicted really in a horrible way.
Unless the serial killer child is murdering the mother.
Yeah.
And then your mom is like, what?
I think another, just jumping back a little bit to like potential conflict or tension you can have with sibling or relationships, family generally. I'm having a hard time wording tonight. I apologize. I feel like everything I've said was but something else you can do is like want like amount of inclusion kind of in the family. In my family, like all of us are like, or most of my siblings are either like really extreme extroverts or really extreme introverts. Which sometimes causes some tension because like my extremely extroverted sister will like go to my extremely introverted sister and be like, please spend time with me. And my extremely introverted sister would be like, I really want to be by myself right now. And it's not like either of them's right or wrong, but it does like definitely cause tension when, you know, the introverted ones don't want to come to family game night or whatever.
Yeah.
Just another kind of stray thought of interesting areas to explore. I've always really liked stories of that kind of like genetically who you are versus who you were raised to be. Like there was a switched at birth contemporary YA a while ago, and there was a TV show of like, so genetically I am this family and I want to know these people, but I was raised by these people.
Right.
And like, so which parts are me? Basically, which is, and there's a lot of that you can do in family, just like reflecting yourself in other people and shared experiences and all that.
Yeah.
Or even
Another
you could be
one-
thinking of like I see this poor trait in my mom, my dad, whatever. I see this poor trait in my family and I don't want to be like them. And then having that like self struggle and like actualization of like I need to step away from this behavior, like that kind of thing.
I completely. A number of mine mentioned like that their parents taught me how not to be a parent, and like I think that's a really interesting dynamic when you have a character who's trying very hard to like not be their parents, and like what happens when they have those moments where they can see their parents in themselves, and like how they deal with that. I think is.
I think that's with parents who are good parents, like. I get along very well with my mom. We have a good relationship. And I remember talking to her once about things I was hoping to do differently with my child. And she like said something along the lines of, well, you always hope that your child will take the best traits of you and your spouse or whoever is helping to raise them and that they will do better than you. Like you always want that. Like, I hope that my kid has less trauma than me, starts therapy early, is a better human than me. Like, you just kind of always hope for that, and it still leads to like interesting conflict, even though you want that for your kid. My parent wants me to be better at certain things, and it's still just interesting.
I saw a TikTok yesterday that basically like parenting is just trying to stop generational trauma.
And then conversely you have like the toxic parents who are like, I had a hard childhood, so you should have a hard one, like like where they're very toxic about that. Like I think someone earlier mentioned they like in like more like the fantasy type books, they like when there's like the generation before was at war and now like the parents are dealing with like kids who are growing up in just a normal life. And I think that's interesting whenever it's like, well, we had it really hard and like your life is so easy compared to mine. And sometimes like that can be a
interesting
tension.
Very interesting. Like if the parents are full rounded characters, they have their own backstory, and like the parents that just came from war and are giving their children not necessarily great childhoods. It's like, do those people have PTSD from war? Like, it's not an excuse, but it's a backstory, right? And it's interesting to maybe if you don't put it in the story, you know why they're behaving the way they are. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Oh, this was really random, but one other tension thing that popped up into my head because someone mentioned the Gilmore Girls, but the instigator child or like sibling or parent or whatever, like someone who means so well, but if things start to get awkward, they will absolutely just set the whole thing on fire, like very Lorelai Gilmore. I like just watched the episode where it's a very awkward family dinner with like her parents and Rory's father's parents, and it's starting to get tense. And so Lorelai's first instinct is to be like, I hate George Bush, and just start an all-out blowout fight. That's very fun tension to play with.
Love writing awkward family dinners. That's my dynamic. I love to write.
Yes.
Honestly, I couldn't even get through some of those scenes in Gilmore Girls because I'm like, this is too much for me. So awkward. Well, we've been going for over an hour. Do we have any kind of final points anyone wants to make?
I think Aurea mentioned something interesting, diaspora families. They said that's really interesting when you recognize yourself only in the language and culture at home versus the world outside your home. And I've really appreciated seeing more books looking at like those, like not just like the basic white American family, but like kids who are dealing with like the expectations of their parents and like immigrant families and things. Are really
versus the outside culture that is not going to be the same as it is inside your house.
Like Kyra mentioned Darius the Great, which like does such a good job with that.
Actually the other one I was considering was Gloria Chow, who writes American Panda and Rent a Boyfriend, and Our Wayward Day. I haven't read Rent a Boyfriend yet. It's actually sitting on my desk right over here. But the other two that I have read, like she does such a good job like talking about like this diaspora family experience. So definitely like check her books out. She's an auto read author for me, and largely because of how well she deals with complex family dynamics.
The other book I considered saying for mine at the beginning was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. And it's really interesting because it deals with two twin sisters, where like one decides to kind of more embrace like the fact that like they are Black, while the other one kind of embraces her like light white passing privilege, and how like they both deal with their race.
What's that one called again? You said
The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. It came out last year.
It's
really
not
good.
the same one though. We did a book club one that was very similar to that.
Oh, Clap When You Land?
No, it was like years ago. It was two sisters, and one of them.
This one's an adult novel.
Yeah,
okay. This one, YA one.
Was it one of the Reese Witherspoon picks last year?
I can't remember.
It sounds familiar.
I think it was. It was like a bestseller and everything. It's really good. It deals with like multi-generations and stuff. It's a good family book.
Cool. Kind of closing up. If you're watching this now or after the fact, and you have any books you want to rec that have good family dynamics, or if you have a tip that we missed, definitely please let us know in the discussion section or in the comment section. Love all the tips.
Yeah, please drop any recommendations and comments. We will definitely check them out. Thank you everyone who joined us and who joined in the chat, and we will see you next Sunday. Do we know it's a game night? It's a game night. Come see us next Sunday. Same time, same place for games.
And it's going to be trivia, and you guys will be able to participate as an audience. So
yes.
All right. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.